Okay, we'll get started. I'm Captain Joe Shute. I'm going to be going over really anything y'all want to talk about. So don't stop. I'm real bad about getting off on a tangent and talking about something, and you'll find me way over here in a little bit when I should be over here. So if you got any questions, be more than happy to answer them on anything. I'm going to start with some of the maintenance and care of our lures. I have a lot of people that I get phone calls and they said, man, the hair on my lure is just torn all up. Said, it looks like crap. I said, okay, well, that's great. I said, what'd you do with it? They said, well, I went fishing, and when I got back, I put it in a bucket. I said, well, that's real good. I said, what'd you do to it when you put it in a bucket? He said, well, I just threw it in there. I said, is that all you did? He said, yeah, and I went out fishing a couple of weeks later, and they said that all the hair screwed up on it. I said, well, imagine that. I said, what you want to do when you get these back is wash them off in fresh water and keep this little tube that they come in. And all you got to do is that right there, and they'll be just as pretty as the day that you bought them. Occasionally you'll get some that really do get out of whack. A little bit of fabric softener on them, wash them off, dry them out, put them right back in the tube again. That's the same. That's a relaxer. That's like a softener. It does the same thing. All of it works on nylon hair. I don't care whose lure that you have that's made out of nylon hair. A lot of people tell me, oh, I had an Islander and it doesn't do that. I said, let me tell you. I said, I owned a tackle shop for 21 years and fished offshore, and said, I can guarantee you they do the same thing. 'Cause I got some look pretty doggone ugly. But if you want to, a lot of people will rig stuff and want to leave it on their rods. You can still do the same thing. Just take that tube, knock the end out of the bottom of it, take a razor knife and split it down the side. You can wrap this around your lure and leave it on your rod the same way. Then just take a rubber band, wrap around it, and affix it to your rod. And if you want to leave it that way, you can leave it that way. And that'll keep all your skirts in real good condition. Over the last couple of years, I've gone up a couple of different diameters of hair to help with the profile of the lures in the water. I use the highest grade hair that you can get. The good thing about it is with that higher diameter, that larger diameter hair, now the profile in the water stays larger and it doesn't collapse on itself. And I've got some seminars this afternoon on making mullet strips, strip baits, rigging a swimming mullet, a whole mullet, and rigging a swimming bluefish. And I'll show you how to do it, how to split everything, how to rig them, and what they look like pulling in the water. So if you want to see what those skirts look like, they'll have probably about a 6-inch diameter skirt on them, and they hold up real well. So that's something if you're interested in this afternoon. But that's pretty much it on the heads. I've got a couple of different heads, and not all places carry them, but I've had a lot of places ask about them. Probably our number one head that everybody uses is the very first one that I came out with. I got real lucky when I designed this one, and it actually came out right. This is our 3-ounce head. It's got a hole that's in the center. It's a centered hole where the Islanders have an offset hole that comes out the bottom. The reason I didn't like the offset hole, a lot of times we're wahoo fishing and we're pulling wire. But when you're pulling single strand wire on those Islanders, a lot of times it'll put just a tiny kink in the wire, a little bend in it. And when that straightens back out, single strand wire will break. So that's one reason I went with a straight hole. I like it pulls better. It's actually tapered on both sides. It doesn't have a round appearance to it. It's actually tapered. That helps the bait track a little bit easier in the water. It's heavier than the Islander lures. These are 3 ounces, where theirs originally were like 3/4 or an ounce at the same size. And our holes in the back of them were cored out in the back. And I did this because when I was bluefin tuna fishing, most of the way that I rig a ballyhoo is a pinless rig with Monel wire, and I leave the bill on the ballyhoo so this slides up inside the skirt and it kind of locks it in position. I like rigging my ballyhoos for bigger tuna fish that way. They hold up better, they track better. If you have, and there's nothing wrong with a pin rig, but with a pin rig, if a marlin happens to come in or if a big tuna hits something and misses it the first time with a pin rig, a lot of times it'll tear that pin out of the upper jaw of the ballyhoo. But when it does, it starts spinning. But with a head rig bait wired down tight, it may cut the back half of the fish off, but it's still going to pull straight. So you may get a second shot at it. It looks more natural still going through the water. So that was the main reason for designing this head the way that I did. And this is probably our most successful head. We sell these everywhere. They catch everything. They work great. I've made a few different modifications to some of them. When the dredge craze was going on, everybody wanted dredge heads. So this is a little 2-ounce head that I made up, and I call it our Big Hole series. This one's actually got a 1/4-inch hole in the front of it instead of the small hole for your monofilament to go through. This works real good on a dredge, but being a tackle shop owner at the time, I tried to figure out some other application I could use this for. Well, I had so many people come in that didn't know how to rig ballyhoo, and they were buying pre-rigged ballyhoo. Well, the thing about a pre-rigged ballyhoo, you're buying it because you can't rig a ballyhoo. All right. When you buy it, it's already, whether it's wire or whether it's monofilament, it either has a loop twisted in the end of it or it's got a loop crimped in the end of it. Well, the first thing you have to do, if you put it on a conventional lure, is you got to cut the crimp off, or you got to cut the wire loop off. Well, you're right back where you started because you don't know how to put it back, you know, or you got to pay somebody. With this lure right here, you don't have to worry about it. The hole's big enough, it slides over the loop side and rides right down. It pulls the same as our 3-ounce head. Another good feature on this, if you want to pre-rig 3 dozen baits and go ahead and put the sleeve on them on one end and crimp them, you can do that. You can slide this over, works great. You're out there, blue and white's catching, black and purple isn't. You pull your other lines in and put blue and white on them. You don't have to, you know, cut your leader ends off and start all over again. So just something else. I mean, it works real good. A lot of people seem to like it. Something else that I did and has worked extremely well is I've made a keel weighted head. This head will always ride with the dark side on top and the light side on the bottom. What I did is I poured just a little more lead down in the bottom that acts like a keel. It's not perfectly shaped round like that or offset like the others, and that works out real well. I've had a lot of people switching from our 3-ounce size heads to this keel weight. I'm probably going to come out with this in a 3 keel. I got the guys in Massachusetts begging me for an 8-ounce keel weight. And I told them, I said, dude, I said, you already got an 8-ounce weight. It's going to run. I said, oh, but we got to have a keel on it. I said, okay. But no matter how you twist that and spin it around, the dark side always ends up on the top. It helps with your bait tracking. I've got a much larger hole back here in the back. For people that like to pull springs, all of my heads, especially this one, the springs fit right back up inside there and they lock tight in there. So whether you're pulling a pin rig and you want to pull this, or you're pulling a rig where you want the pinless rig, where you want the head of the bill of the ballyhoo to go in here, it works well on both of them. Even works good on the 3-ounce, which is a smaller hole. It just fits tighter. So if you get it set the way you want to, you can actually push it in there just a little bit and it'll lock the bait in there. So that'll help you a little bit there. On the pin rigs though, one thing I will mention, I have a lot of people come in and they'll say, I'm having a bad problem with my hair twisting up because it hung back there, it gets all twisted up around the pin. I said, well, how long is your pin? Well, it's about 1 inch long. Well, that's about a 1/2 inch too long. Then it also gets wrapped inside the spring, and then you have a problem pulling the spring off, changing baits, but it's because that pin is so long. When you're pulling it and the hair's moving in the water, it gets wrapped around that pin. So make your pin, if you're using a pin rig and a spring, just long enough and after you've done one or two of them, you can figure out the length on it. But just do it long enough to where that little offset edge of that pin that spring will hang on there and screw right down so it's kind of flush and you don't have a lot of excess pin sticking up. That'll take care of a lot of your twisting of your hair. So I just wanted to bring that up on the pin rigs. We also have 8-ounce rigs, skirts. These, I had some gentlemen call me from here in Jersey, New York and Jersey, that wanted something. They said, we got to have an 8-ounce head. I said, well, why do you want an 8-ounce head? Said, we're having problems with the big eyes. He said, the big eyes are coming up on our flat lines, and as they're rushing towards the bait, they're shoving so much water in front of them that they're actually taking the lighter baits and they move them and they're having to come back for a second shot, and said sometimes they don't come back. So they wanted an 8-ounce bait, so we made this 8-ounce bait that runs real good in rough water and on your flat line. I really like it on the long rigger, because whenever you're circling a pod of bait or whales, if you make a real tight turn, as heavy as this is, it throws slack in and that bait will drop 30 or 40 feet. And then when you straighten back up and get out of your turn, it comes back up at an angle, and a lot of times when that's changing depths and coming back up at an angle is where you'll get your bite at. But this works real well. It tracks great in the rougher waters, and that's the extent of our head sizes. Any questions on the lures or keeping up with the lures before we get into any rigging stuff?
8 ounces, how far back do they run them for the long riggers?
Different boats, different lengths, you know.
Like last year, everybody's running way backs. I was saying that's what was getting hit in the running. We got hit on a couple of times, but I've seen some guys that look like they were running it where they came from. Like,
look, it's different. Different people have different theories on that, you know, different, whether you're running outboards, whether you're running diesels, you know, and getting to that, that's it. Now, where I'm at in Moorhead, our bluefin fisheries in December, we fish from 20 to 60 feet of water when they show up there, and that's usually 2 to 5 miles off the beach is where the best of it has been for the last 6 or 8 years. And the outboard boats are crushing the big boats, you know. And where the big boats are dumping half a 80 or 130 on their long riggers, on their long baits, the center console guys are running them 300 and 400 feet behind the boat, but they're catching twice as many fish as the big boats. Only thing I can figure in that shallow water, because most of the center console boats now are all 4-strokes, they're so quiet that they don't have to worry about that. Where the diesel boats, you know, it kind of works bass backwards to what people used to think. They used to think that the vibration and the hum of the diesels actually drew the fish up, you know, and everybody has different wheels for, look, I got guys, they got different wheels for bluefin. They pull those off for marlin season, put a different set of wheels on for that, and they claim it works, and it probably does, you know, but
yeah, the same thing I said about the sink part. You're not sinking your engines.
Exactly. And I'm sure that does work, because I fished with a guy one time that had a problem with his engine and it had a vibration to it, and we crushed the bluefins on that boat. And he finally got it fixed. We didn't catch hardly anything on it, so I don't know. Yeah, all right. You know, that's the problem. Re-break it. It worked before. Let's fix it. You know, if it works, don't fix it. You know, even if it's a little bit of aggravation.
Is there a benefit to using the lighter ones? I get the big one's not going to be pushed by the water, but the light one's going to be more action.
The light one. The thing about it is you're fishing lighter. It's, believe it or not, that little rig right there has probably caught just as many blue marlin as the damn big heavy, you know, offshore trolling lures have done. Whenever you catch a big fish, there's nothing to shake around to throw the hook. I mean, all it is hair, really. I mean, and on some baits, all you're wanting to do is put a little accent on there to get a little bit of, you know, set it apart from something. And I don't know. I mean, that's the only theory I can think, you know, but I never thought about pulling any real big heads till about 15 years ago. Everything we pulled were, you know, smaller heads, and it always did work. But
do you find that the baits track different whether they got the spring or if they're just tied up, rigged?
If they're rigged properly and the bait's not spinning, no, I can't tell much difference from what I've seen. Now, there may be some difference, but I haven't seen it.
If the spring is fast, you know, if you're free rigging.
Right. And see, the thing about it is, that's like I use, when I run charters back home, during the summer months, early spring, we're targeting dolphin mostly. I mean, we get a few tunas mixed in here and there, or sailfish or wahoo occasionally. And I use rubber bands. I mean, I take a number 16 rubber band. I don't use the little small ones that a lot of people use. I use a number 16. I wrap it around the spring, around the crimp, and pull it back through itself. And you got your small 1/4 ounce egg sinker, and then your pin. You rig your ballyhoo. You run the pin through the lower jaw and the upper jaw. You take that rubber band, zip it around quick, hang it, throw it over. You're done. But the dolphins don't care. I mean, and you're going through. On a day, we'll go between 48 and 60 baits on an average day. Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, and you don't want to sit there and head wire everything. But when I'm head rigging these baits, I like the way they pull. They do a great job, but I'm only rigging a dozen a day. I mean, when you're bluefinning, or where I'm at, I mean, if you go through half a dozen baits a day, you've either had a stellar or a real bad day, one of the two. So it does take more time to rig them that way. And there's another way that the Canyon Runner crew rigs them, and it does an extremely effective bait, and that's split bills. And you're running my lures on top of the split bills, but you're not running it the way I normally would run it, which would be with the bill going up inside the head. The bill, instead of coming down and running inside that head, such as that, the way we would normally pull them, with a split bill, it runs up on top of the head like this. The split bill is a great way of doing things. It acts like a lip on a diving plug. Your bait actually goes a little bit deeper, digs a little bit deeper. You have excellent side-to-side motion, and 90% of the time, the first time you put it in the water, if you rigged it right, it's going to run straight and it's going to swim. A lot of times, excuse me, when you put the leader over, always throw the fish over first before you put everything in the water and start trolling it. You just throw the leader with the fish over, because your head slides all the way up to the other end. You don't have to put it in. You put it in the water in a prop wash and you look at it. If it's sitting there swimming, that's great. Then you slide the head up, pull it out, slide the head down on him, let him go. If he's not swimming exactly right, a lot of times you can take that leader and snatch it 1 or 2 times, and what you're doing, you just create, so there's a bind somewhere in there is all it is, and you're just kind of pulling everything together, and a lot of times that'll straighten it up and it'll start pulling straight. But this is an excellent way to pull the baits, and takes just a little more time to rig it. These are rigged with way too small a hook on them. I went in there this morning to get some ballyhoo to rig, and I had planned on rigging mediums, but I would have hated to have been in the first ballyhoo rigging class, because everything was frozen solid when I went in there. So I picked out the closest thing that was semi-frozen, unfrozen. But
Are they running on like a heads like with the split bill? Or are they
yes, they're running it with a 3 ounce head. On these rigs, you can run up to a 3 ounce head. The problem is the 3 ounce and lighter works real good on them. The problem is if you go much heavier, what happens is between the weight of the lure and the force of the water coming on there, after 30 or 45 minutes or an hour, especially with the heavier heads, it actually breaks the bill and the whole front of the face of the ballyhoo off. So you don't want to I wouldn't want to run an 8 ounce head on there, because it'd just be too much for it. But the 3 ounce heads seem to work real well for it. So.
Well, if it dredges everything else, no problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, not that I've seen. So. Okay, any other questions right there? Another way, like I said, I rigged this one on wire, just to give you a little example on with the head rig, about the pinless rig. Swear I take my glasses off and can't see anything. All right, there we go. Jeez. This is a pinless rig. I leave a little more of the bill on there, and the reason for that is everything slides up inside the head. Skirt kind of seat it down on there, and the skirt will stay pretty much in that position. This is the way that I normally rig my baits for bigger fish, the bluefin, stuff like that. It takes just a little more time to rig than a pin rig, but it's a very stable rig, and the fish swims real good with these heads. So that gives you a couple of different options right there. Something else that I'm going to bring up that I said somebody, I don't know what I did with it, whether I just misplaced it or somebody borrowed it from me, which usually happens every now and then. When you're going way offshore, and if you don't want to rig ballyhoo all the time, this, just for an example, this color combination, this is a 5 3/4 ounce head, pink and crystal hair, with a pink Ron Z rubber tail or a pink hoagie rubber tail behind this, is a very deadly bait. Damon Romeo got first place at Ocean City, Maryland. I think by the time the lawsuit was over with, he won close to $3 million. I think the tuna money was $670,000, $680,000, which was the largest prize ever for a tuna category. And the Tri-State, 2 out of the last 4 years, was won with this color combination with the Ron Z pink tail behind it. So just because you don't have ballyhoo doesn't mean you can't go fishing. And one thing that I always do, if I'm going offshore, I want to make sure I've got an alternative of some kind on board my boat, because I don't know how many of you like me have gone way offshore and then you find out the ballyhoo you got were no good. The bellies come out in them, they didn't pull worth a darn. You made that trip and now you're out there and you don't have anything to pull. So if you keep some of these alternative plastic baits around, or some of the alternative strip baits that I'm going to be speaking at in this afternoon's seminars, you'll always have something that you can put in the water and pull and save today if you don't have anything else to go on there. Strip baits and rubber baits are probably 2 of my favorite things to pull behind some of the lures. They look good. There's a video online Mike Hogan put out of a hoagie behind one of my lures, and he put a diver down and shot up and did some excellent underwater photography with it. And it's got twice the action of any ballyhoo I've ever seen going through the water. So you can pull them faster. Mentioned earlier about the circle hooks on the ballyhoo. This is a way to get around the circle hooks in tournaments. You're running regular J hooks on these things. And people say, well, you don't catch as much. Well, I know of 4 tournaments been won with a soft plastic in one of my skirts. So, I mean, that just disproved that theory right there. So if you don't know how to rig a ballyhoo with a circle hook, or you're uncomfortable with it, you can pull this with a regular J hook and bypass all that. So, and they catch fish. So, okay, something else I'm going to talk about is anytime I'm setting out my lures, I always, when I'm fishing for bluefin tunas, or really if I'm anywhere in North Carolina when I'm fishing, I always fish something down deep. And the way to do that, fairly inexpensive, is with a planer. This is a number 32 Old Salty planer, but that works real well. You can do them on an inline planer rod. A lot of people like the planer rod. It's good. But if you don't have $1,500 to invest in a planer outfit, you can buy a $35 hand reel that does the exact same thing. Do what, sir? Yep. Yep. Yeah, these most of this stuff's going to run, if you rig them on this stuff, most of it on 100 feet of line is going to go about 40 feet deep. That's about max. Yeah. Yeah. And I had a lot of people tell me that their planers were fishing deeper. Well, where I fish at, our shoal's got a gradual edge going up, and we're fishing in 60 feet of water, and everybody said, yeah, our baits are down around 55, 60 feet. I said, no, they're not. I said, they're not that deep. So I headed to the shoals, and every time I hit 40 feet, that planer would trip and come to the top. So I figured out pretty quick how deep that planer's fishing. But with these outfits right here, they're inexpensive. There's 100 feet of 300-pound braid on here. There's a 3/8 rope on the back of it. It's got a loop in it. Yes, cleat it direct. What you do, once you put it over in the set position, feed it out. These reels work great. You can hang on to them. Just make sure at the bottom, whoever made it up for you, that you loop itself back over the reel spool, because if you don't, when you get to the end, you quit. You go get another one because it's gone. If it's, I always loop mine back over the spool. That way when it comes tight, because when you're going ahead at 5 or 6 knots, there's a lot of pressure on this. And you have to have something to hang on to. When it comes tight, you got something to hang on to. You can grab that rope, take the loop off, and go straight to your cleat with it. And that's where you're going to fish it off of, is that cleat. And depending on which side you want to put the cleat on, you want to put a 5-gallon bucket in that same corner. The reason for that is when you get a bite on this planer, the reason I fish the old salty planers, it's the only one on the market that you can actually trip while you're still going ahead and not have to stop the boat and get it out of the way. If you don't have a hydraulic reel or a planer, I mean a downrigger to crank it up on, and you got to get it out by hand. What you do is, with this thing in the set position, I actually speed up a knot or so after I get the bite. I reach down and grab the rope, take a wrap on it, and I back up 4 or 5 feet in the cockpit and let go of it. What that does, that throws a big loop in this line, and it's running around in this set position like this, and when that loop hits that line, that ring drops down to the bottom, this thing comes tight and it comes straight up to the surface. Then you can get it out of the water, and that's what you got the 5-gallon bucket for. Don't grab it all of a sudden and just pull it like this, because if you do, after the first strike like that, it's going to reset and go right to the bottom. Just take it hand over fist, nice and steady, and you can get that 100 feet of line in that bucket. It's not on the deck. Pick the planer up, set it in the bucket, everything's cleared, you can fight your fish. You go to redeploy it, all you got to do is put it in the water, hold your hand right over the bucket, line comes through your hand, every bit of it comes right back out nice and neat, and you're redeployed and ready to start fishing again. The way that we fish this, I normally run a 3-ounce head on it with a ballyhoo, or one thing we do run on it, and I'll be showing later this afternoon, I love to run a split tail mullet on a planer. You get a lot of bluefin bites on these bigger baits, especially when the water's kind of dingy. A bigger bait's going to work a little better. But you've got your planer set. Excuse me. The way we fish this, you take your rod that's got your lure on it and your bait, you set it out however far you want to fish it behind the planer, 300, 400 feet. I usually don't go much more than that, because the more line you put out behind the planer, the higher the bait's going to rise in the water. So I want to keep it pretty much down around that 40-foot range. So I let out about 300 feet, maybe 400 feet. And then I put the reel in lock the drag up, put the rod in the rod holder, reach up, grab the line coming off the tip, bring it down, take a number 64 rubber band, make 3 or 4 wraps around the line. You'll have 2 loops come off. Take a double-ended snap swivel, snap it into 2 loops, and there it went. But snap it into the 2 loops in the line, and that attaches it to the line going down to your bait. Then take the other side, open it up, and hook it to the line going down to your planer. Then walk over, pick your rod up, kick it in free spool where you're already going ahead at 4, 5, or 6 knots. So the drag on that bait's going to take this and is going to slide it all the way down until it hits this little bead stop about 18 inches in front of that planer, so it doesn't get hung in the planer. The way you get, now you've got a big bow in your line. You don't want to fish that with a bow in the line, because if you get a bite, you could miss the fish because it doesn't come tight quick enough. What you want to do is look at the angle your planer line's going in the water, and that your line off your rod tip is going behind the boat. You want them going in the water at the same angle. So all you got to do, the rod's in the rod holder, just sit there and crank it till it comes real tight. These rubber bands don't slide real good on that monofilament, so you can really crank it 3 or 4 times, and you'll take all that bow out of that line. So then you get a bite, breaks the rubber band, you're straight to the fish. Don't have to worry about this planer anymore, and that's when you retrieve the planer and get it out of the way. I don't like to fish, I'm on a small boat. I don't like to fish more than 1 of them on the boat, because if you've ever had 2 planers get together with 2 long leaders, especially a lot of people like to put a whole skein of fluorocarbon on each leader. I hate to think of $200, $300 worth of fluorocarbon all wrapped up in a knot about that big when you're done. So I only fish 1 on my boat. On a bigger boat, if you got a nice wide transom, I'll fish a 32 off one corner, I'll fish a number 12 off the other. That way you're fishing 20 feet deep and 40 feet deep, and then you got your top lines. When you go to make a turn real tight, your baits have 15 or 20 feet in between them. So if you have to make a real tight turn to miss a boat, or if your turn's a little bit too tight, those two lines should not get tangled. That's when you have a problem with them getting tangled. When you make a turn, if you've got them set both at the same depth, chances are they're going to get wrapped up. But the problem with it is you don't know that for about 20 minutes. And they're both down there doing this number for 20 minutes, and it's all over with. That's what I said. You pull out the knife and you just throw those $300 bills worth of fluorocarbon overboard. So, any questions? All right. Well, I wanted to bring that up. That's one real good way. I don't go anywhere and fish anywhere without a hand line and a planer, because out of the Morehead City area, probably 60 to 70% of our bites come on a planer for the bluefins. And a lot of times when we get that bite on the deep, 40 feet, yes sir.
How deep water are you fishing in?
Anywhere from average depth is 40 to 60 feet.
Really?
That's where we're fishing. Yeah, we're very, very fortunate. And the do what now?
You can't really take off either.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can get it, especially the small boats. That's where they have a big advantage. You get right over top of them and work them real good. But our fish went from the late 90s and the early 2000s when we had huge numbers of them. I mean, I used to run stand-up charters for them out of a 23-foot center console boat. The average day was 3 to 4 fish a day per boat. My best day was a half-a-day trip. I caught 13 on a half-a-day trip in 8 feet of water. They were on the shoal. The way I found them, I was going out to shoals to go to the P buoy out there, and the water was clean enough, and I was running late, and I saw the gannets pounding in the shoals, and there was a big swell that day, and the current was ripping across there. But you could actually see them swimming through the swells. I said, good enough place to put them out right here. And we put them out, and luckily I took the back way home. It was pretty rough that day. My motor blew up on the way home. But we caught 13 on a half-a-day trip, about a 5-hour trip. They weren't great big ones. They were all 250 to 300 pounds. And I'll be showing this afternoon. As I like stuff simple, and I'm not the best rigger in the world, but what I rig catches fish. And I'm from the old school. I've been doing this for a long time, and when I first started doing this, nobody even knew what a ballyhoo was in North Carolina, if you can believe that. All we had were strip baits, and mullet strips, menhaden strips, albacore strips. A strip bait, you cannot rig it wrong. It cannot be pulled wrong. It lasts 3 times longer than a ballyhoo. It takes up no room in your freezer space. And if you're good with a cast net and a knife, it doesn't cost you anything. And they look so much better swimming in the water. I've got some video of it this afternoon, I'll show you. But I used to strip out for the shop to sell. On an average time when I'd go cast net the mullets, and I'd probably strip 200 to 300 pounds a day. And out of every one, you split the tail, so you get 2 full baits out of every strip. Perfect size is 8 to 10, 8 to 10 inches. You rig them different than a ballyhoo. Instead of the hook going down, the hook rides up on a strip rig, and you got this funky little pin here instead of a straight pin for a ballyhoo. And what the reason for that is you take your strip, you run this pin through the meat side out the scale side, then you run it down, up, and over this hump. Then you lay your fillet out nice and flat, see where that hook bend's going to come out, and you push the point of the hook through the meat out through the scale side, and your bait lays nice and flat. Well, this long pin here, what that does is you take your lure head, you slide it down the mono or the fluorocarbon. If I had my glasses, I could see better, but there it went. The skirt goes over that pin. That effectively locks that bait on with this front pin, and the force of the water keeps this pulled back over top of that. It's a real simple rig. You don't need springs, you don't need rubber bands, you don't need Monel, you don't need anything. And that right there, I will take a mullet strip in this rig and go side to side with a ballyhoo 24/7, 365 days of the year. And I'll bet you I'll put just as many fish in the box as the ballyhoo does. And the good thing about this is, ballyhoo, you have a problem down in our area, I don't know about up here. We're trolling them for bluefins, or we're trolling them offshore. Doesn't make any difference. And you know, well, yeah, those two. But all of a sudden you crank it in to check your bait and you got half a bait. An albacore or a dolphin or a king mackerel's come up and cut half your ballyhoo off. The rod tip never moved because they're so soft when they hit them, they just cut them right in two. But with a strip bait, especially after they're brined, they're 10 times more hardy than a ballyhoo. A lot of times you'll see that fish will hit it and your rod tip will move, but there's enough left there, he'll come back for a second go round. Where with the ballyhoo, once you get a bite, it's done. If he didn't get the hook, he ain't coming back usually. He's already got his belly full. And you can take 10 dozen strips and put them in a conventional upright refrigerator freezer, and you're going to take up about that much space. You take them out, you use them, you keep them on ice. You don't use them all up, you take them home and throw them back in the freezer. You thaw ballyhoo out, you take them offshore, you don't use them, you throw them in the water when you get back. You know, so it's a huge, you know, savings on fishing. And if you come back in and check out the video I got, you'll see how good they look pulling in the water. And once you get them, there is no rigging to them. They're so quick to rig. They're nice and easy. And they have a lot bigger profile in the water also. So that's a couple of different ways. Your soft plastics, the strips, a couple of different ways to rig your ballyhoos, different heads, different, you know, applications for each one of them. The planer. I mean, that's a lot of the basics that I can give you right now. And I just hope everybody has a successful season this year. Are there any other questions on anything anybody like to ask? Well, I appreciate you coming in and using my products. Do what, sir? Oh yeah, they work. Yeah. Yes, sir. In fact, I've got on that other video what you can use instead of the mullets, because I know you don't find them up here. You can take a bluefish or a menhaden and strip them out and do the same thing. Look, we used to leave in the early or late 70s, early 90s when I first started king fishing. I'd take a cast net, and this is before anybody thought about a live well to put stuff in. We'd throw the cast net, get all the menhaden. Well, on the ride offshore, I was sitting back there on the back, splitting them and salting them down and putting them in a bucket. And by the time I got offshore, which back then, a 12-knot boat was a fast boat, so we weren't going too fast. So it took us a while to get there. So they had about 3 hours to sit in that salt. And when we got where we were going, we used these strip rigs, and we caught everything on. I mean, and you talk about something that'll work good on, even on the stripers up here. You take some of these fresh pokey strips about that long and put them down there and see what happens. You know. Yeah. No, well, you'd have to get them brought in, I'm sure, from somewhere, but you can use them, the menhaden or the bluefish do the same thing. The bluefish don't hold up as well. You just got to salt them a little bit heavier. The mullet are probably the primo because they're a real thick scale fish, but any of that stuff's going to work. Yep.
Early season bluefish.
Oh yeah. Yeah, just, and that's what I was telling somebody. I said, you want to have a good time, take your kids, your grandkids out one day, take a little, you know, hard, you know, any type of jig you got, you know, eat anything that moves, and catch all you want about that big and just throw them on ice and go home, strip them, flay them out, put them in a brine, depending on how many you want to do. I used to do about 200 at a time, and I'd put like 3 or 4 pounds of salt. I'd use a full box of baking soda, and I'd put them in a 48 quart cooler, and I'd put 1 5-gallon bucket of either salt water or regular water. It didn't make that much difference. Put it in and mix it up real good, and then I'd throw a 10-pound bag of ice on top of it and close it up. And in 24 hours, that baking soda helps bleach the blood out of the meat. It makes it nice and white. It also firms it up. Excuse me. And you take them and lay them in a Ziploc bag, a gallon Ziploc bag, and fan the tails out where they stay nice and flat. And you can get 6 to a bag with no problem. And you take those and stack them. And my walk-in freezer, I kept it at -15 and they never froze. And it was great. I mean, you go back there and pick them up, fish them. You didn't like them, you put them back in there and they were just as good the next time you took them out. Same thing with these mullets. I'll show the whole mullets when we bluefin fish with them. You fish them all day, you don't get a bite, and you got 3 or 4 days you're fishing. You pull them back in, put them on ice, and they'll pull for 4 or 5 days. So.